Well, Disney is riding strong. They've had an incredible year, and they own pretty much everything now.
Yeah.
So, if you don't see these Disney films showing up in the box office top 10 by the end of the year, Disney's having some problems, and they're going to be looking for some new direction. But I don't think that's going to happen based on what we're seeing with the Marvel films and also the Aladdin remake that came out earlier this year, and they own Pixar as well, so Toy Story. And here we are, The Lion King. The Lion King is back. 1994 was when the original animated classic was released. It's a legendary film based on, loosely based on a legendary writer, William Shakespeare's Hamlet. So there's been a lot of interest in this version. A lot of people are asking, is this live action? And it's not live action, Thomas.
Well, there's one shot that's live action. Jon Favreau confirmed that because he wanted it to be considered live action so it could be up for the visual effects Oscar, which, in my opinion, I don't understand that, because why wouldn't you just go full animated and go for the animated Oscar? Because
Exactly.
the best animated feature, because it would have been a lock for that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Without
I think
a doubt.
so. And the problem is when you split those hairs and you've got one scene that's live action and everything else is animated, you're locked out of that other category.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk. The story is pretty much the same. You've got this Lion King who, and this happens in the first 10, 15 minutes. And of course, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the original, but the original Lion King dies. All right? He dies.
Mufasa. James
Mufasa
Earl
dies,
Jones voices him.
trying to save Simba, his son, from this stampede. He dies, and of course the evil brother, or the evil uncle, Scar, ends up taking over and in many ways kind of exiling Simba, because he tells Simba that, hey, you're responsible for this, you better run. He does. So the rest of the story is, okay, will Simba find his way back? And if so, can he reclaim the crown that's supposed to be his? Anything else to add? He has some friends, but is there anything else to add to the story that you think is relevant?
Well, it's all about him reclaiming his responsibility and kind of growing up and realizing that he's his own person, and Scar manipulated him, manipulated his whole family, and he's got to come to his senses and realize that he has control over his own life and the lives of those around him.
Now, here we are, and I've talked about remakes before on this show, Greg, and there are three reasons to do remakes. One is to add something different and fresh. The other is if there's some kind of new technology to update it that hasn't been there before. And do you remember the third, Thomas?
Well, you put me on the spot, so I did
That's okay.
not, so
That's
I
right.
apologize.
I can guess.
Okay.
Cash grab.
What?
Cash grab.
Well, you could say cash grab would be a third, but the fourth one really leans to the original film wasn't that well known, or maybe obscure, or maybe from another country.
True.
And they're trying to find a way to bring it to life in a new country. This one, I think, was all about the technology and making it look from a live action standpoint. Favreau, he received an Oscar for The Jungle Book.
Or his visual effects crew did.
Right. So here we go. Let's dive into our thoughts on this version. Should it have happened is the first question.
Well, I'm going to say no. From a story perspective, it added absolutely nothing to the narrative. It was just beat for beat, almost shot for shot. It had a lot of the same dialogue and repeated. And it's one thing to remain faithful to the original and then add some more layers to that, add some more depth. But to just completely rehash and recycle, there's really no reason to do other than to show out their new technology.
Yeah.
Makes it sound like a remake similar to what Gus Van Sant did of Psycho years ago.
That's
exactly shot-for-shot remake that didn't bring anything new to the party.
Yeah, now this one was not a shot-for-shot all the way through, but the opening scene is completely shot-for-shot from that original opening scene in The Lion King. I went back and revisited the 1994 version the next night, and I walked away, and what's interesting, when we get to our grades, it's going to be interesting to hear how our grades change, and that doesn't normally happen. But I'm right with you, Thomas. As I was watching this remake, I felt, okay, I didn't feel like there was a whole lot new. The character chemistry was fine. I mean, the voice talent, solid voice talent in this remake. But it felt flat to me.
It did.
Because the only thing different was it looked live action to an extent. And what I mean to an extent is The animals, their voices, you didn't see the facial expressions. The facial expressions were missing, and that really bothered me.
Yeah, they could have added that in animation, but for some reason or another they didn't, and that was probably more of a directorial decision, because if the animators had wanted to do that, they would have done an astounding job with it, because the rest of the creation of the environments and the animals was gorgeous.
Yeah.
But for some reason they didn't want to give the animals human-like expressions, and I can't really understand why they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It was a bit distracting.
I will say that the visuals, though, were for the most part, the visuals were stunning. I mean, you really felt like you were watching live action scenes. You thought you were watching when the animals were running across the plains. You're like, oh my gosh, those are real animals. Yeah. So they did fantastic work on that, but they didn't use motion capture for the actors. And what they did is they did black box theater. And so they did have cameras within the theater capturing their expressions, and it was more about their movements, because they had the actors doing these movements and doing things like that. They tried to have the animators recreate that.
And it didn't work?
Well, they didn't do motion capture, so there was no facial expressions on these.
I'm assuming it was lip synced at least properly.
Well,
not really.
How do you?
It felt. I mean, you know what puppets look like?
Sure, that's what it looked like.
It kind of felt like the Muppets.
It didn't really match.
I'm sorry, it kind of felt like the Muppets.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't a budgetary thing for Disney. It was just a poor creative choice.
I thought it was lazy.
During the
that was just me.
Yeah, that's how I felt as well.
Wow.
Yeah, but visually
that would
stunning.
devastate a film like that, wouldn't it?
Well, for me it did, and we've been having some interesting conversations about this movie and some interesting dialogue or debates with others who are film critics who haven't seen it yet, but they're not happy that we're dogging this. But it brought nothing new to me. I mean, it's not a movie I'm going to go back and rewatch again for the story. If I want to do that, I'm going to go back to the original.
I mean, they could have easily expanded on some of the characters, some of the side characters, like Nala, who's the lioness, she's actually voiced by Beyonce in this.
Yeah.
They could have expanded upon her, giving her some extra characteristics, but they didn't.
Or Scar, backstory.
Even Scar.
I mean, you could have had a good backstory on Scar to kind of figure out, okay, has he always just been evil, or was there something that triggered it?
Yeah, even
You don't
with
get that.
30 extra minutes of runtime, they struggled with pacing. Some scenes were drawn out too long. Then the climax was kind of rushed, and I really feel like they poorly handled those extra 30 minutes.
Yeah, it was pretty much of the same from the original, and there was so much opportunity here to make it fresh. Even the songs that were used, of course, the same songs, but Elton John wrote an original song for this. It was played over the credits. Beyonce's song, you said it felt kind of.
It was just kind of thrown in there. It was just used as a transitional tool more than anything. It wasn't used as like a musical number. It was just used as a soundtrack over the actions. And but we do need to give some love to Hans Zimmer. His updated score. Of course, he did the original score and won an Oscar. And his updated version was astounding in all ways. And he definitely added some more layers to it.
Yeah, but the original songs that were kind of recreated here, they suffer from much of what the film did. The arrangements felt like they could have been out of 1994. The way it was performed felt like it could have been out of 1994. There was just nothing fresh and new. Compare that to Aladdin. The Aladdin songs felt new and fresh and modern.
Right. So, cash grab?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, it's, the critics are not loving this hard.
It's going to make a ton of money.
It'll make
For
money.
sure.
But a serious disappointment for
For me,
the summer.
yeah, for me.
Yeah.
And I will say, when it was over, we both kind of sat there going, the visuals blew us away. I mean, without a doubt, the visuals blew us away. And so it was an A- was our initial.
As long as they don't talk.
As long as they don't talk.
talk.
Our A- was our original ranking.
Sitting there right after
Sitting there right after it, but the more we thought about it, the more we digested, the more we went back over the notes of it, it just kept dropping. And yours dropped. What's your final?
My final grade is a B-. Unfortunately, as soon as I got into writing my review, the more I wrote it, I realized I'm not talking about anything I loved. So it's a B-.
Yeah, and mine dropped to a B, and then after watching the 1994 version, it dropped to a B- as well. So it's a film. When we saw it in IMAX, so we saw a huge screen. Watching the sound design, I think the sound design will be pretty phenomenal on this version of it, but the story just really gave us nothing new and nothing worth writing home about.
You know, when you think about it and you look at the films that Disney has kind of rebooted or remade in one way or another, Beauty and the Beast, Dumbo, this, Aladdin, the reviews generally have not been all that positive. And the films have only been moderately successful in their
Yeah.
translations.
Yeah, probably from the critic standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, most have been made money. Dumbo not as much.
Right.
But generally, creatively, they seem to kind of fall short.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's so much they could have done with The Lion King. I think you could have taken out the musical numbers and not made this a musical, or either updated the songs. I think you could have still told the story. Maybe had the music as maybe the backdrop and not necessarily a full-fledged musical.
Right.
The humor was there with our two characters that we love, the warthog and the
Timon and Pumbaa.
Yeah.
Yeah, Timon was Billy Eichner, and Pumbaa was, of course, Seth Rogen. So they were great.
Yeah, yeah, they
just
were
like you
fun.
would love them in the original, they're great in this as well.
Yeah, but the original voice talent was solid on this one as well, and honestly, the guy from Tool Time, what was his name? Jonathan Taylor Thomas. No,
Thomas.
was that it?
Yeah, that's
something
it.
like that.
Thomas?
Yeah.
His version, I liked a whole lot better.
Yeah, of young Simba.
Yeah, the young
and-
Simba. I liked this a whole lot better.
Yeah.
So B- for The Lion King for me and for Thomas, but the visuals will really blow you. A+ from the visual element, and everything else really took it down for me. So.